Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 25th of July. Joining me for this edition are news editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Do you guys like Italian?
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
No, I'm from Iowa. I only work in outer space.
So the sharp-eared amongst you will notice that I'm not Phil Hinton. I am in fact Stephen Withers. And I'm standing in for Hill because he's not very well. Although don't panic because he's not big enough celebrity to actually die in 2016. Right, kicking off quickly. James Martin, possible favourite to replace Chris Evans. What are your thoughts, Ed? I know you don't like him.
No, I can't stand him. If James Martin joins Top Gear, I'm not watching it ever again. Obviously, with the constraints of this being a public podcast, I can't explain why I hate James Martin as much as I do, but it's not simply down to his television persona. So it's as simple as that. If he's on Top Gear, that's the end of it. Goodbye, good night. They don't need another person to replace Chris Evans. They have a strong trio of people in LeBlanc, Evans, and Reed. Not Evans. Essentially, Chris Harris and Roy Reed and Matt LeBlanc. That's the ones. And they, just scooting around for another, irritable redhead. I don't see what the point is. It makes no difference to how the show should work. And I don't think he's a very good fit at all. He should stick to cooking inane, bland tat on Saturday morning television.
Yeah, I assumed there was another James Martin who was some sort of motor journalist. I didn't realise we were talking about the chef.
Saturday morning kitchen bloke.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah, that's a very strange choice. No, I know he likes his cars, but no. I don't watch Top Gear.
Stranger than Chris Evans.
Yes, stranger than Chris Evans.
Yeah, I think stranger than Chris Evans, because Chris Evans is at least a known TV presenter.
Okay. And Matt LeBlanc?
Well, he's turned out to be the surprise package of the whole thing. So I don't think that's necessarily the issue. As I say, I have a particular aversion to James Martin, which makes me ill-placed to judge the soundness of this decision. But on a wider level, I don't think Top Gear needs anyone new. They've got the bits there. They just need to have the faith in it.
So generally, we're not that happy about the idea of James Martin being the new host of Top Gear.
No. Not in any way, shape or form.
Moving on then, quickly, Sam Allardyce. Is he a good choice as England manager?
Considering who he was up against, which was not very many candidates coming forward, and considering he has a history of making very poor teams a little bit better, then maybe he is. Maybe he is a decent choice. We're never going to win anything anyway, but at least we'll be organised in defence, and the players will know what they're doing, which is patently not the case under the last boss. So I'm not a big fan of Sam Allardyce, but he's probably the best of a bad bunch.
I disagree. I would have actually rather have taken a bit of a risk on Eddie Howe. Is my gut feeling.
Yeah, but he didn't want it. He didn't want it.
Oh, in that case, he should have been.
I would have had Eddie Howe, but he's got things to do. He's got things to achieve at club level.
This is true. On the plus side, if we've got Allardyce, we'll be able to cut the highlights reels down to about 4 or 5 minutes because there won't be any. So, in terms of television scheduling, I think it's a perfect choice. But in terms of our football team being a continuous source of limitless disappointment, I think he's a perfect candidate to keep flying that particular flag.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
It just seems to me that it's turning into. Have you ever seen that film? Is it Mike Bassett, England manager? I mean, it's becoming. Yeah. That's turning into reality, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember it now. I think I've seen it. It was very
Art
bad,
imitates life. Ricky Tomlinson.
It was Ricky Tomlinson, of course it was. Yes, that's right. Yes, that was a bad film. I don't know. I think he's probably got a bit of an unfair rep for the long ball now. He hasn't really done that for a while, but it'd be interesting to see who he brings in as coach. And we'll qualify for the next tournament and go out early, regardless of the money. Yeah.
Okay, right, fine. Let's move on. 5-star reviews. First of all, we've got Adam Jack Drew, who says, the AVForums podcast is my staple of podcasts, and I patiently wait for the next episode. Amusing and insightful, awesome work. Thank you very much, Adam.
I love the way that you step straight in there, because the next one, Win 555, interesting, informative and entertaining news and chat about all things AV and some cat talk. Actually, I think we've been quite remiss on the levels of cat talk of late, so we need to make sure that we continue to just introduce that as a sort of fourth pillar of our work.
Well, the podcast is young and we've all got cats, so it could happen yet. Next up is Useless. It's my weekly AV fix with some witty banter thrown in for good measure. Sometimes has me crying with laughter. Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, at least he's crying with laughter and not crying because it's just really, really bad. We often end up crying at the end of it. Magpie 1000, mandatory for all AV enthusiasts, the best source of information on the AV scene, with the added element of humour and even the odd recipe in the past. Well, that'd be you, Mark, but no one really liked that, did they, apart from you?
No, I didn't even like. I didn't
Thanks
even like.
Magpie 1000.
Norlissimo says knowledge, humour, pathos, intelligence, irreverence, and sometimes irrelevance. I'd say more than sometimes, but there you go. AV technology news delivered with a laugh and often a rant. Yes, do you know what? That's not bad. Actually,
That's probably the best comment. That's probably the most incisive comment.
I'll take that.
Relevance and irreverence is a good tagline for the podcast. Thank you very much, Norlissimo.
And we've got Matthew Letitia, presumably Saint Letice. This podcast has developed into a very enjoyable weekly ramble through AV news, reviews, and general pottering. It balances nerdy chat with a genuine love of AV. Also quite good.
Good name for a band, that, General Pottering.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Current competitions, Ed. What have we got?
You can win Metallica through the Never Blu-ray. That's open to all members the 17th of August. Bridge on the River Kwai Blu-ray. That's open to active members to the 19th of August. And Terry Pratchett's The Colour of Magic Blu-ray, which is open to all members until the 24th of August. So a veritable smorgasbord of noise, Alec Guinness, and magic there. So get stuck in, and I wish you the very best of luck.
And were there any previous competition winners?
There weren't.
Okay, excellent. Right, well, let's move on to some hardware news.
So is this the worst kept secret in AV this year, do you think, Steve?
Yes, absolutely. For those who haven't seen the front page or haven't been reading the forums since April, Sony launched their ZD9, new ZD9 TV with Backlight Master Drive last Wednesday. And yes, really badly kept secret because basically they had a press event in April where they didn't mention the ZD9, and the following day they had a dealer event where they told them all about it. And that was almost immediately on the forums. So in April, I knew the specs, I knew the screen sizes, I knew the prices, I knew it was coming, and I knew when it was coming. So the fact that we're sitting there in Sony Pictures screening room on Wednesday night to be told all this officially was a bit of a letdown, really. But yeah, they finally launched the ZD9, which is based on which uses the Backlight Master Drive, which Phil and I first saw as a prototype at CES back in January. Now, that prototype, and it did look very impressive, I have to say. At the time, Sony was saying that it was 1,000 LED zones and a peak brightness of 4,000 nits, which is very impressive. At the launch of the ZD9, they would not confirm the number of zones or the peak brightness, which is a little bit suspicious. You'd think, well, why wouldn't you say that if that's the case? Obviously, when we actually review it, we'll find out exactly what the peak brightness is and how many zones there are. But they wouldn't actually confirm the number of zones, the peak brightness. So basically what we do know is it comes in 3 screen sizes, 65, 75, and 100 inches. 65 inches priced at 4,000 or 3,999, which I got to say, I think it's quite an attractive price for what you're getting. There's, I think it's 7,000 for the 75 inch. And a whopping 60,000 for the 100 inch. I don't think they'll be selling too many of those. That's a
lot for 25 inches, isn't it? It's a big
looks wise, the 65 and 75 basically follow the same kind of design style as the previous Sonys this year, the XT93 and 94. So you've got the sort of champagne gold edge with a black trim, and it's very attractive, minimalist kind of monolith looking design with the angled metal feet. The 100-inch one has sort of big feet stands that we've seen on previous Sonys in the past, the big screen Sonys in the past. So it looks quite familiar there. It also includes the X1 Extreme 4K HDR processor. So basically they've got the Backlight Drive is the big selling point, plus also an updated processor. And there's a lot of new features in there, a lot of which are basically around kind of creating faux HDR. So similar to things like HDR Plus on the Samsung. Sony say that their system works by actually analyzing the image, and if it's wood, it knows it's wood. And if it's cloth, I mean, God knows how it knows all this, but it's got a database basically of images which it uses to sample against. I mean, it's really clever, yeah. And it does work. I have to say, they were showing. I mean, obviously, at these demos, you have to take it with a pinch of salt because they're set up by Sony to make their TV look the best. But they were showing SDR content on both the X93 and the ZD9, and using their what they call HDR remaster, basically. I've got to say, they were drawing every last tiny bit of detail out of the source signal. And it did look quite impressive, although I still thought it looked a little bit processed.
Yeah, I had the XT93 here for a few weeks, and that had a faux HDR mode as well, and at certain times it could look incredibly impressive, but then it'll switch to another scene where it looks completely fake and wrong. And I was assuming that they've improved it for the XD94. It'd be fun to have a play with. Sorry, ZD9 rather. I found some of the processing really, really impressive, but then it was a letdown, just around the corner, as it were.
I mean, at the end of the day, HDR content is mastered and graded, 1,000 or 4,000 or 10,000 nits, depending on what it is. So there is that latitude within the image. Whereas, if you're talking about SDR content that's graded at 100 nits, 120 nits, it just isn't there. So you can't add what isn't there. All you can do is just drag out as much as you can of what isn't there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. But ultimately, I'd rather watch a properly set up and calibrated SDR image and then a properly set up and calibrated HDR image. And if the ZD9 can deliver 1,000 LED zones and 4,000 nits peak brightness, then that's a real step up in terms of HDR performance. But we'll have to wait and see.
It's 4 times on paper, isn't it?
Yeah, well, theoretically, I mean, most content is mastered at 1,000 nits, but there is some that's 4,000 nits. For example, quite a few of the Warner's titles on Ultra HD Blu-ray were mastered by Dolby for Dolby Vision, and they used a 4,000 nits master. So there could be some content out there that is. I think it's certainly very interesting. It certainly shows where we're going, I think, over the next year or so. It'll be interesting to see what comes out at CES. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was certainly in the demos that I saw, it did look really good. Blacks look really black. Obviously, the peak brightness was very bright, and the overall image quality. I mean, they actually had the ZD9 up against one of their €30,000 OLED professional monitors, and it held up really well against that, which is saying something considering the difference in price and difference in screen size as well. So I think it's going to be impressive. And I'm really looking forward to getting it in for review because, I mean, if it does do what hopefully it does do, then I think it'll be great. But we'll have to wait and see. It should be hitting stores pretty soon. They said within 2016, so I'm guessing within the next month or so. But we'll find out.
Well, Sony's flagship TVs have got a good track record of being really, really good. So it should be quite special, I think, this one.
I mean, Steve, obviously looking at this from a more sort of layperson's perspective, I mean, it does look like, we have in the past in these podcasts accused Sony of being quite unadventurous with a number of their television ranges. I mean, this, superficially at least, whilst it doesn't necessarily look like there's a feature which isn't being seen anywhere else, so to speak, it does at least look like they are doing something other than a basic by the numbers effort. This does seem to be a bit more of a determined attempt to get up in a market presence in the television sector. And is this sort of indicative that they are really starting to put some legwork in and take it seriously again?
Yeah, it seems to be the case. I mean, my criticism of Sony isn't so much they don't innovate, but they just don't seem to release a lot of it. We see a lot of prototypes it shows. I'm thinking of things like Crystal LED here, where you think, well, that looks amazing. Then it never makes it to market. I mean, this was shown in January. It's now hitting stores in, I guess, Q3. So that's good. I mean, they've shown something and they've brought it to market, which is a nice change after recent stuff that we've seen from Sony. And yeah, I think it is exciting, and it is good to see Sony pushing things in a new direction. I mean, be interesting. Like I say, it'll be interesting to see where things go from now, because there's clearly a move towards wider color spaces and higher peak brightness, because obviously that's the way that TV standards are going in terms of Rec 2020 and HDR. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it's certainly laying the gauntlet down as far as the other manufacturers are concerned. It'll be really interesting to see how Samsung respond to that, because obviously they've also been really pushing LED LCD as still a competitive format, as opposed to obviously LG's OLED technology. And also, it does rather, say, we were talking about it last week, has OLED got a future in an HDR world? If we're moving to these kind of brightness levels, we'll see. But it threw the gauntlet down. It's an interesting looking TV, and I think it's priced quite competitively. Personally, I think that's true. I mean, I've seen on the forums people saying, "Oh, it's really expensive," but I don't know. It just seems reasonable to me.
But just got to be careful on that. Reviewer price blindness is it's a significant issue. For another publication, I've got a little pair of speakers in from Switzerland at the moment. They're about 60 centimeters tall, tiny little floor standers, and they're £5,500 the pair. I spent a bit of time going, do you know what? That's not bad at all. And then I sort of sat back and thought, hang on a second, $5,500. It's like, yes, I periodically need to recalibrate how I sort of view these things. It all goes a bit wonky if you don't pay attention to yourself. So you've got to be careful here.
You've got to think, how would you feel if you were sticking your hands in your own pocket to actually get that into your house?
Well, just dust and cobwebs come out when that happens.
Yeah,
for me. It makes
likewise.
no odds.
All right. Well, moving on, but sticking with Sony. Mark, you've been looking at the Sony UHP H1 Blu-ray player.
Yeah, this is the 4K Blu-ray player that isn't a 4K Blu-ray player. They announced at CES with a great fanfare, and they seem to be very excited about it. It's 4K capable, so it can transmit 4K up to 60 frames per second through its HDMI 2.0 ports. I'm failing to get that excited about it, really. It's quite a niche product for me. If you're after a disc spinner that's also a good high-res audio player, and if you fall into that category and you want one box to solve it, then go ahead, fill your boots. But at £400, you could go out and get yourself separates to do the job just as well for less. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with it as such. The build quality is great, although it's all plastic. It's an all plastic thing. Although it feels really, really heavy and really, really well made. It's well connected, like I say. It's got dual HDMI ports, so if your equipment doesn't support 4K or 3D, you've got an audio out for your HDMI. It's got stereo outs, Toslink digital audio, and coaxial digital audio. And other than that, it's like virtually every other Sony Blu-ray player. It's got great video processing. The scaling on it is really, really good. Even like a good DVD can look pretty nice on a 4K panel. It's got the usual apps, Netflix, Amazon, but not 4K again. So there's no HEVC decoding, which is
really? What is the point of that?
I know. I'm starting. Like I say, it's really, really niche. You'd have to be thinking, I'm not bothered about 4K Blu-ray, and I do want a high-res audio player in one package for it to be even relevant to you. I've got the Samsung K8 which is obviously an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, right next to it, and comparing the capabilities, audio aside, you'd have to go for the Samsung every time. If you're a video guy, then you're just not going to spend £400 on this when you can go and future-proof yourself, get almost as good video processing. It's just the scaling on the Samsung's slightly different. It's a little bit more processed looking, but it is still really, really good. I can't knock it as such in its performance, just in its intent and the market that exists for it. I just think it's really, really small, and I wouldn't buy one anyway. Let's put it that way. It's going to get a recommended badge, but only for that very, very niche need of requiring an all-in-one high-res audio player along with a standard Blu-ray disc player.
Ed, presumably as our resident audio guru, you could think of better ways of streaming high-res audio than a Sony UHP H1 Blu-ray player.
Well, obviously, it's always, as Mark was saying, it's a useful value-added thing to have in one box. But yeah, there are a number of sort of more dedicated options from £100 and up, which will get the job done if you do want to split it over.
You could even buy a Raspberry Pi, couldn't you, and get it done for
absolutely that, yeah.
£60, and then a Blu-ray player for £120. You save yourself £220, and you've got the same performance. I don't see the point of it unless you're really short of space. It's
interesting, just so I don't feel left out from the Sony talk. I've got a Sony product in at the moment as well, in the shape of the PS-HX 500 turntable. Which is a bit of a peculiarity in as much as it looks perfectly ordinary. In fact, it looks incredibly dull. It's a study in black, but it has a completely extraordinary party piece, which is unique. In that, as well as being able to digitize vinyl, which is something that we've seen on a couple of products so far, it doesn't just plump a plain, boring old CD resolution. It's capable of encoding to high-res audio and DSD, which is interesting in as much as it does at the moment represent the only consistent way I've got of creating a DSD file. So I've been making some effort in that regard. So yeah, this, going back to what we were saying about the ZD9, this is Sony sort of doing something completely off the wall, if you like. I'm beavering away at the review as we speak. That will go up next month. And yeah, if you wanted to know where the innovation's gone, they're not doing it in Blu-ray players. They're doing it in turntables.
Yes, bizarre, isn't it? The company that created and invented Blu-ray.
Well, you'd be able to play your DSD files on the UHP H1 anyway, if you have that combination.
Oh, there you go then.
It does play DSD. Yeah.
All right, sticking with audio though, Ed, Audioquest, they've got their Dragonfly Black, Dragonfly Red and JitterBug DACs and was it D-Jitter device, I suppose?
Yes.
Now, can you talk a bit about that?
Yes. Audioquest is best known as a manufacturer of cables. Think of a cable, think of a length, think of a price, and they make a cable. But they moved into digital a few years ago now. They launched the original Dragonfly, and that was then replaced by an updated model, and now there are two new ones which have appeared: Dragonfly Black for £90 and Dragonfly Red for £180. And the big difference for this generation is that the older Dragonflies only worked when connected to something like a laptop or something with a USB powered USB bus, basically. Thanks to what actually has been a considerable amount of effort on their part, Audioquest has got these present generation of Dragonflies to work on the end of either the Apple camera kit device or an Android on-the-go cable, which turns them into mobile DACs. And I mean, it's one of those things where it sort of looks superficially simple, but this is the first time I've ever tested a DAC to that can connect to a mobile phone that has no power or battery of its own, and that's actually quite a considerable achievement because the amount of power that these mobile devices make available over their USB connection is very limited, and furthermore, it doesn't seem to affect too chronically the actual battery life of the product once connected. And I have to say, I was genuinely thrilled with how they sound. The Dragonfly Black at under £100. We're going to sort of discuss this as a sort of further, we're going to segue effortlessly into a sort of wider concept here. But if you have a relatively up-to-date Android or iOS phone and you attach a Dragonfly Black to it, broadly speaking, you get performance which is pretty much indistinguishable from most of the dedicated audio players that we've had a look at over the last sort of 2 years or so. And for the all-up costs of that, I mean, if you think about what certain of these phones are being let loose on, and just inclusive in contract, or if you absolutely have to buy one, how much the Nexus phones and the like cost, it's extraordinarily cost effective. And it really is a sort of demonstration of how flexible and how clever digital products are sort of becoming in this regard. I mean, don't get me wrong, in order to make them function in the way that they have, Audioquest has had to make some design compromises. They are unable, for example, having discussed that Sony ripping to DSD, these can't handle DSD. They don't have any means of switching to a higher function of USB operation. They function driverless, but they can still handle high-res formats up to 96 kilohertz, and that, let's face it, is going to be enough for most human beings. And I have to say, I've been absolutely delighted with the performance of both of them. The Black, I would say, is more than up to the job of working with pretty much any earphone that you'd care to think of. If you want to do something crazy and run full-size headphones off a mobile phone, the Red is absolutely extraordinary for that. I mean, I was using the pretty big Audio-Technica 2000Zs on the end of my old Nexus 5 with the Red attached to it, and it didn't just sound all right, it sounded genuinely good. And this is seriously good value for money and a genuinely impressive thing from Audioquest.
And what's the JitterBug?
The JitterBug is a bit more of an oddity in so much as it is an entirely passive filter network which sits between the USB output of a device and the USB DAC, and essentially reduces noise and extraneous interference from a USB device. Now, this all sounds a bit witchcrafty, doesn't it, really? But if you open it up, it isn't just a little empty box with a little message going, haha. It's got a tiny passive network of capacitors and the like. And whilst I'm not going to for a second say that it's a night and day sort of difference, if you're using the Dragonflies with a laptop in particular, I'd be surprised if you didn't sort of go, ooh, some of the noise has gone. Just if you have, for example, if before you actually start playing a piece of music on a streaming service, just have the volume up at the sort of level you'd normally be listening at, and there just isn't that very slight level of background noise that you'd sort of accept as being normal when you're using a laptop. And that's, both PC and MacBooks. It manages to scrub away some of the sort of low level interference that you get. And given that it's 40 quid, it's not the most, risky purchase going, is it? It's certainly worth a go. I would suggest if you're using a computer as your primary audio source, it's a bit of a sort of, what have you got to lose style purchase. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of just getting slightly better performance out of this grisly old ThinkPad that I'm using at this moment, I think it is a genuinely useful little thing, and it's not desperately expensive. And yeah, it's not simply for use with the Dragonflies. Was doing some work testing it with the Cord Mojo and a couple of other bits and bobs that are lying around here, and it did make a small but appreciable difference in most instances.
Excellent. And I assume there are some Best Buy badges on AudioQuest's way then?
Yes. I mean, I know I get criticism for badging lots of stuff, but one, I do get to choose. The good fellows at AVForums are very, very kind, and I do get a fair amount of discretion in items. And I have to be honest, life is too short to seek out bad items to write at length to you about. I know some people find that it's quite cathartic to destroy things, but I'm not that person. I've got to spend my time tinkering with these things, so I generally try and hunt out stuff that I think you'll be quite interested in. Okay. And yes, I would say for me, the black at 90 quid is a no-brainer, brilliant piece of kit. The red, a bit more discretionary. I don't think it makes enough of a difference to justify the price hike if you're just using earphones, but if you are a headphone user, yeah, it's definitely worth seeking out.
Okay, brilliant. And let's then seamlessly segue into the next question, as you said earlier, Ed. In your opinion, what's the best way to listen to music on the move?
If we're just talking in performance terms, we have reached the awkward situation where I don't think any dedicated audio player can make a justifiable performance argument for itself anymore. That's might be slightly contentious for some people. Equally, I don't think it's going to be very contentious for a number of other people. Items like Chords Mojo, to say nothing of the Hugo and the like, are able to take any ordinary mobile phone and get a level of performance out of it that is absolutely and totally on equal terms with anything that the dedicated personal portable audio player market is handling. And as I said earlier, even the AudioQuest DragonFly Black and a mobile phone, it's capable of great performance, virtually unlimited headroom. I mean, if you go past the 50% point on a DragonFly Black using earphones, you'll be easy to spot because you'll be the one with blood coming out of most of your orifices on your head. It will go face-bendingly loud. So that's not an issue either. And we also have to face the awkward point that an up-to-date mobile phone generally has a better and slicker interface than many of these dedicated audio players do. There is a but. There's always a but, isn't there? All I would say is that the sole remaining argument for the dedicated portable audio player is that having one allows your phone to spend time being a phone. When I went to Yamaha's Music Cast 2 launch last month, I left for Heathrow at unbelievable o'clock in the morning, and I was spending some time in the departure lounge listening to music. I listened to music on the plane, and so on and so forth. I took the Pioneer XDP 100, which came back because it can now do MQA, and it's still here at the moment. Because the Pioneer took the strain in terms of me just listening to music and playing around with that, it meant that whereas on a normal sort of trip of that nature where I would have stopped charging my phone at 4 o'clock in the morning and it would be quite late in the day before it could get anywhere near a mains plug again, and normally battery life would become quite critical, my phone was just doing phone style things, and by the end of the evening I still had sort of 45% left. And that is, if you are spending your life on the move, you are commuting, you're doing things like that, there is an argument that having a device taking up some of the strain that you're subjecting your phone to, and constantly having to have chargers at your desk, portable batteries, all the rest of it, that there's an argument that it has a worth at that point. But
would you rather take? Sorry, I'll just interject because it's relevant. A lot of these new phones are of USB Type C, and what you're seeing now is these mobile power bank type things that are tiny, small things that'll give you an awful lot of charge very, very quickly. So why not just take one of those if your phone's capable?
Because I'm an obsessive compulsive. I actually have a mobile battery as well. That's another completely logical option. All I would say is that if you're using your phone with an external DAC, you're going to have to disconnect the DAC to start charging the phone, because you've only generally got one.
My phone's an LG G5, which has it's a modular thing, so it's got you can plug in a B&O DAC that's specially made for it. Yeah, it does 24-bit DSD. I mean, I haven't laid out the 150 quid necessary, but to me, if you were looking for an audio solution, then the phone manufacturers are going to have the solutions for you a little bit more conveniently within the next 2 years.
I would agree. Yes,
these portable audio players are just going to be completely obsolete for me.
I think that they are on, they're on thin ice. Essentially, any of them which can't. That aren't using an open operating system to allow for the installation of streaming services, they're extraordinarily limited. I don't think I could justify spending out the money on a product which couldn't do that. Things like the Pioneer, I think, have bought themselves some space because they are able to run Tidal, Spotify, what have you, and they obviously have a maximum capacity which is beyond most mobile phones, not all of them. So that gives them a bit of an advantage. But yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think mobile phones are closing the gap particularly quickly, and I think that they are going to be the logical answer. I mean, there is a spanner in the works, and this is unconfirmed. So we're in these sort of conjecture states here, but a number of people online have been mentioning that Cord, the people that make the Mojo, have been experimenting with a way to turn that into a portable audio player, a completely self-contained one. So that could be, that could be another sort of curious alteration, because the Mojo functions as being able to do all sorts of different things anyway. So that could wind up being relatively interesting. But no, I would say that mobile phones have got most of the answers, and the way things are going, they'll probably end up with all of the answers. And also, I keep talking about adding external items to them. A small subset of mobile phones actually have very, very good headphone outputs in their own right. Much as I'm not an enormous fan of the actual functionality of them, I would say, having listened to the latest generation Samsung Galaxy, that's actually a pretty good sounding phone in its own right. And my old Motorola Moto X actually sounds pretty good as well. Don't get me wrong, there's some horrors out there as well. I mean, my old Nexus 5 has got one of the worst headphone outputs I've ever heard. So it's not a given. But yeah, they do seem to have a lot of the answers. I think the portable audio player market briefly sort of sparked into life, and I think it's now being hacked about with from lots of different angles, and it's going to go back down to being quite specialized again.
Mm-hmm.
I think from a personal perspective, I don't want to walk around with two things in my pocket. So if I can find a way of using the phone as a phone and as a music player, then that's the ideal solution. And things like the Dragonfly, because they're really small, seem like the ideal solution to that problem. Because much as I love the Oppo DAC and headphone amp, and it's beautifully designed, it effectively means you are carrying a second phone around with your phone-sized device with you. There are other things. I know there's the Arcam one you slide the phone into, which is slightly better because it kind of adds a little bit of extra size to the phone. But generally, I don't want to walk around with two things in my pocket. So I think that's probably what most people think. Other than a small select group of
nutters.
Audio. I was going to say enthusiasts, but yes, nutters. So yeah, I guess it will ultimately, if as phones. It's incredible to think that how much a phone can do now. I mean, people probably don't use their phones that much for actually making phone calls anymore. They're just using it for Pokemon Go and listening to music and texting their mates.
Yes. Obviously, it must be said, Pokemon Go is the major killer of phone batteries at the moment. Not listening to music, so
it's the major killer of people as well. Well, there was a local news story. I don't know if you saw it. It was on BBC. Right underneath my house. There was a whole complex of mines and tunnels in Box that were originally a quarry for Bath Stone, and latter day have been nuclear bunkers basically. And some kids were following Pokemon Go, and they ended up down in the tunnels or in the quarry rather, which is actually quite dangerous and had to be rescued. So if you're listening to this and you're playing Pokemon Go, play sensibly.
Yeah, there was a Snorlax.
Or grow up, yeah.
There was a Snorlax in the park near the other day. That got lots of people very excited. I don't know what a Snorlax is, but my wife was saying it was a big deal. So,
right. Moving on. You've already mentioned that you've got the Sony turntable coming up. What else have you got coming up for review?
In terms of things that are in the bank and can be put up at any time, we have got... there's another installment of Sound Advice. There is a stand mount loudspeaker from Riga, because Riga is not just about turntables. They've been making speakers for almost as long as I've been alive. So this is the RX1, their latest stand mount, which makes an interesting comparison to some of the speakers at that price that we've already looked at. It has slightly different design priorities and a slightly different outcome as a result of that. And then, because periodically it's time to do something a little bit different, we have a headphone amplifier DAC and preamp from a Danish company called Copeland, although you'll look at it for the first time and it reads like that Sylvester Stallone film, Copland, because it doesn't have an E at the end of the P.
That's exactly how I read it, yeah.
And that is... Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise, really. It looks like very little else we've ever covered. It has functionality subtly different to anything else we've ever covered. And ironically, we've actually now covered quite a few of these products. We've covered the Hugo. Steve did the Name DAC V1 a couple of years ago. I've more recently did a product by Sim Audio, the Moon, which is another DAC preamp. This is pitching into what is becoming a major market segment for two-channel audio. And rather than just be a bit of a Me Too product, they've gone and done something a little bit different. It's well worth a read. I have a suspicion that a number of people are going to read the review and go, well, yeah, that doesn't necessarily blow my frock up over much. I have a sneaking suspicion that one or two of people are going to read it and go, do you know what? I kind of need that in my life right now. So, yeah, it's a subtly different thing. And then coming up, we have got... say the Sony DSD ripping turntable. We have got a product from Bose, no less. We have got the latest iteration of the Quiet Comfort headphones, the QC35, which is different to its predecessors in so much as it is now a fully wireless product, if you wish it to be so. And then we're rounding off the July reviews with an all-in-one system, again from Moon, the Sim Audio Moon Ace, which appeared at a number of shows earlier in the year and picked up a number of sort of in-show awards for sort of most interesting product there. So basically I clubbed my way to the front of the review sample list, so you guys will get to read about whether it lives up to those that early promise earlier than most. So there you go.
Thank you, Ed. That was exhaustive.
Comprehensive answer. Don't expect the same from me.
Yeah, Mark, can you be quick?
I've got, other than the UHP H1, which is due very soon, I've got also coming soon will be the LG SH6, as LG call it, the complete soundbar, which means it doesn't come with a subwoofer if the woofers are built in. So I'm not sure how complete that really makes it. I've got the Panasonic, it's the right box of tricks. It's 3D Blu-ray player, twin tuner, Freeview HD PVR, HDD recorder, records to disc, does all sorts of stuff. I've also got a little Windows 10 PC and a WeTech Hub, which is an Android media player, which looks very promising, winging its way to me now, and a monitor that I've forgotten. It's BenQ. I can't remember the model number. Yeah, it's just a basic business, no frills monitor, which I'm using right now, and it's fine.
All right. Well, not to, at risk of sounding like I'm playing a game of
what have you got,
top
Steve?
trumps, I've got the Samsung HWK950 Atmos soundbar, and it's still early days, but I have to say I think it's awesome, really good, and the Atmos really works, and it's a lot cheaper and a lot smaller than the YSP-1500, 5600. But yeah, that's great. I've also got.
How's that price, Steve?
I can't remember top of my head.
600-ish.
No, it's more than that. It is over £1,000, but it's still not as expensive. But plus it comes with a subwoofer. But anyway, more on that later. But that's on its way, and it is impressive. Also, the LG G6 flagship OLED TV, and the Panasonic 50DX 802B Ultra HD 4K TV. That's what's coming up for me.
I do wonder if LG selected G6 as the code just because of the similarity to the Learjet. So all of those, blingy rapper songs are talking about scooting around with their G6. The LG's just hoping to cash in, and a number of thick people will assume they're talking about televisions.
Since they won't be able to afford a Learjet, they're more likely to buy the LG option, aren't they, really?
Oh,
Anyway. Okay, so lots of exciting stuff coming up for review soon. Watch out for that. That's it for hardware news. We'll be back with movie news. And it is movie news this week. I was going to go and see Star Trek Beyond last night at midnight in order to review it, but while I was still working, and frankly, I just couldn't face getting home at 3 a.m. and then getting up and doing this. And like you, so
interestingly though, it's been getting some quite strong reviews.
Feeling I'm going to be eating my words from last week, because it's actually starting to look like, I've seen some more clips. It's starting to look like it's really good fun, and it's had some really good reviews. And basically, people are saying it's basically like a really good, big budget, fun episode of the original TV series. And if that's the case, actually, I think this might be quite good. And I am actually now looking forward to seeing it. I'll probably go tonight, and I am looking forward to seeing it. So yes, I could be eating humble pie this time next week. In terms of films opening this week on Friday, we've got Finding Dory, which is the sequel, obviously, to Finding Nemo, which has done gangbusters business already in the States, well over 400 million. To middling reviews. I mean, it's good, but not a great Pixar movie, but certainly better than some of the more recent Pixar movies like The Good Dinosaur. But you can kind of guess where this one's going. And also opening on Friday, Jason Bourne, which I believe you're quite looking forward to, aren't you?
Yes. I say I am really looking forward to it. I have enjoyed the previous Bourne films, with the exception of the Jeremy Renner one. I have an irrational distaste for Jeremy Renner. I can't tell you why, I just do. I'm slightly concerned, having watched the trailers, that it misses some of the essence of what made the earlier Jason Bourne films great. But I think in many ways Bourne is one of Matt Damon's sort of strongest pieces of sort of cinema performance, and I've not been disappointed by any of the preceding three. So based on that, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and stumble off. I've still got a voucher from having watched Independence Day 2 in Blu-ray vision. I've got a free trip to the cinema. So
I think you should have been given a free trip to cinema just for having to watch Independence Day Resurgence.
Well, we had this discussion. As far as I was concerned, it was a good bad film. I expected it to be drivel. I wasn't disappointed. But yes, I'll probably use my voucher to go and see Bourne. I mean, I have to say, I was sort of thinking about Star Trek. See what happens there.
Mark, you looking forward to Bourne?
No.
Right.
Although I'm not a fan. I've seen all four of them actually. I quite enjoyed them, but I'm not going to rush to the cinema. I'll watch it on Blu-ray.
Will you take your kids to see Finding Dory?
If they want to go. One of them thinks he's too old, and the other one doesn't really like the cinema. So I might be going on my own.
You haven't got an excuse, you mean?
But on the other hand, the one of the Blu-ray releases this week, they both enjoyed thoroughly. But we'll come to that.
Yeah, well, I was going to move on to that. So thank you for that nice little segue. Blu-ray releases this week. There's two major releases. There's Zootropolis and 10 Cloverfield Lane. Now, Zootropolis, have you seen it?
Oh, mega. I loved it.
Absolutely
outstanding. Yeah, brilliant. I've not enjoyed anything of that ilk so much since the Lego movie, I don't think. It was brilliant. I think I enjoyed it more than the kids, to be honest.
Well, it is full of plenty of, there's enough jokes in there for kids and for adults. It works really well. I mean, I've got to say, in terms of Disney animation, I think they're on a better of a roll right now than Pixar have been. Yeah. Some of the Disney, things like Wreck-It Ralph and this, really good animated movies that appeal to all ages. And this one is made over $1 billion worldwide, so it's done extremely well, but it deserves to. It was a great film. And obviously, as a Blu-ray, looks and sounds absolutely stunning. 3D, if you've got the 3D Blu-ray and you're still into 3D, is really good as well. It's a great Blu-ray, so I highly recommend that. And 10 Cloverfield Lane I watched last weekend, and I've got to say, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great film. I really liked the concept. I really liked the denouement was quite clever. The sort of tension of them being in the bunker was really well done. The characters trying to work out each other's motivations was good. And it has a fantastic Dolby Atmos sound mix as well. So lots of good reasons to get that.
But it's not a direct sequel to Cloverfield, is it?
It's got nothing to do with Cloverfield, really, other than having Cloverfield in the title. There's nothing to do with it, as far as I could tell. So you don't have to have seen Cloverfield to watch 10 Cloverfield Lane. You can still completely enjoy this. It's got nothing to do with it, really.
Cloverfield was the first Blu-ray I ever bought. True fact.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Strange choice of Blu-ray, considering it's a found footage shot on video.
There was, do bear in mind, again, with the specific reference of me doing mainly relying on stuff for audio. That was the thinking behind it, and I also seem to remember it was on offer at the time. So that was the thinking there. But no, I mean, I was weighing up. I have to periodically, get some new films in for testing. I have to say, I've been intrigued by this Zootopia or Zootropolis thing. So see where we go from there.
Yeah, if you're still buying Blu-rays, and in the case of Zootropolis and 10 Cloverfield Lane, you have to, because they're not available as Ultra HD Blu-rays. I strongly recommend you pick them up.
I'm not regularly buying Blu-rays. I need to be very clear on this.
I'm really talking to you there, Ed. I'm talking to everybody else.
I buy them periodically, so that when I review something multi-channel, it's not like when I watched film from 2009, because I already do that enough times with Unstoppable as my sort of continuous one. So.
So those are the Blu-rays that are released this week. If you're still if like me, you prefer Ultra HD Blu-ray, there's been a couple of announcements. Specifically, we've had a day and date release now for X-Men Apocalypse with a Dolby Atmos soundtrack. Unfortunately, not a great film, I have to say, but still should be a good-looking Ultra HD Blu-ray. Ed sent me this bit of news, but I had already read it, which is that last week, Allegiant, actually all three Divergent films came out on Ultra HD Blu-ray. But it looks as though, since Allegiant didn't do very well at the box office, they're now going to be making the fourth one was going to be a TV movie leading into a TV series, which sounds utterly desperate from the producers.
I don't know. It's a warning to a lot of people out there that this teen fiction stuff. It's not an unlimited well of resources, and also. I think that you're on thin ice. The moment that you start splitting books to make more films, you're on very thin ice. I mean, The Hunger Games just about got away with it, and that was, let's face it, a big franchise. Everyone else, it's like, do you know what? Harry Potter, yes. Hunger Games, everyone else don't. You just don't. You don't have the goodwill, and you don't have the levels of interest to sustain that sort of silliness. So, generally, try and keep it one film per book.
Yeah, I think they're reaping what they've sowed here. Really, I mean, did Divergent really need its last book to be turned into 2 films? Absolutely not. I think get to the point and get it over with. But anyway, so that's.
So are you buying the Ultra HD Blu-ray?
Oh, obviously, yeah, I've got the Ultra HD Blu-ray.
Just checking. I knew the answer.
Oh God. We need to make sure that this is obviously when the next great format comes along, that this time capsule of awesomeness, by which I mean drivel, is actually and preserved for the ages. You know, it needs to be stored in just a way as to keep optical discs alive for the longest possible point, as the lengths that one man went to support a format, and involved a complete bypass in terms of taste and quality.
I am single-handedly keeping Ultra HD Blu-ray alive. In terms of, obviously, as I mentioned, X-Men Apocalypse is coming out. That's actually on the 4th of October in the States. I don't know about the UK dates, but it should be similar, I think. And also, Now You See Me Too has been announced by Lionsgate for release on Ultra HD Blu-ray. That's on the 6th of September in the States. Again, I'm not sure about UK dates, but I'm sure it will be around about the same time as well, or probably just soon after. So those are 2 new announcements. Both films I've seen, and actually of the 2, I quite enjoyed Now You See Me Too. So I'll probably enjoy buying that one on Ultra HD Blu-ray. X-Men Apocalypse not so much, but I will get it, obviously, for the reasons that Ed's just pointed out. Right, let's move on to our semi-regular topic, Star Wars news. Did anybody, apart from me, obviously, watch the live streaming of the Celebration event last weekend?
I think we know the answer to that.
No? Both got lives.
Lives, children,
everything.
Yeah,
Beer.
Can I make it clear? I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched the Rogue One panel, during which they first premiered their sizzle reel, which is basically a bunch of behind-the-scenes shots and interviews, short little featurette, basically, as promotion. They showed that twice actually during the panel. Then at the end, they showed it again to those of us watching streaming live. But the people actually in the auditorium at the convention, they got to see the new Rogue One trailer, which has still not actually been released, which is kind of annoying. But apparently you do get your first look at Darth Vader in that. So I'm looking forward to that one when it finally does hit the net. I've got to say, I looked. Did you actually watch the sizzle reel? No.
I've got to be honest. I don't get that excited about trailers of any description. Not least because they tend to give away far too much anyway. So I don't make a huge point of this. The chances are I'll see Rogue One very shortly after it comes out. They don't need to now tell me anything more about it. I will sigh, hand over some money, make sure that I can handle the hordes of idiots around me, and I'll go to the cinema. They've won. They don't need to throw anything more out there. I know that both you and very much so with Phil with the with Star Wars things, it's like looking for an extra 15 picoseconds of previously unseen stuff. I've got to be honest, whilst I have many, many, many sad aspects to my life, so I'm not going to judge you, it's not something that blows my frock up. It just doesn't get to me, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I'm excited for Rogue One, but I won't go out my way to watch all the coverage. I don't want to get overhyped like I did with Force Awakens.
What I liked about the sizzle reel, to give it, as I keep calling it, was that they were stressing, again, as with the Force Awakens to a certain extent, they were stressing the fact that they were using real sets, they were using real locations, and that looked quite cool. And they were talking about shooting in the Maldives, and they had members of the Maldives army done up as stormtroopers, and obviously these guys had absolutely no idea what they were doing, what Star Wars was, why they were wearing these costumes or anything, which I found quite amusing. But what was really interesting was there was a brief interview with the director, Gareth Edwards, where he's talking about, filming Rogue One and being his absolute dream gig, and Star Wars being his favorite film of all time. He says, but then he said, but even though Star Wars is my favorite film of all time, unless you bring something new to the table, unless you can add something new, change something, what's the point in doing it? And that just felt like a real dig at J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens, because that didn't bring anything new to the table at all. It was such a slavish copy of Star Wars, particularly. So, and then again, it might even be a dig at some of the rumors that have been flying around that executives at Disney weren't happy with his first cut because it was too different from Star Wars. But, he was trying to make a war film more handheld, a different style, of shooting and a different look to the film, but while still retaining some of the classic elements of the original Star Wars film. So I, for one, am actually looking forward to it, just because hopefully it will be different.
No,
What I
I'm
don't
looking
want see
forward to
something-
it. I'm just not watching all of the stuff. Just to be clear on this, I don't want to be judged.
Okay, fine. Let's move on to our not so regular feature, which is Star Trek news. It's obviously Star Trek Beyond just opened at the cinema, and there's been some big news, isn't there, Hodge, in terms of the TV series that's upcoming in January, I believe.
That this came from left field, although it's probably not all that surprising when we think about it. But the new series of Star Wars, which is Star Wars, sorry, sacrilege there for Trekkie fans. The new series of Star Trek, which starts in January 2017, will premiere exclusively on Netflix outside of North American territories. So anywhere but the US and Canada will be getting to see the episodes the day after they're aired in the US. Is it on CBS? Is that right? Can't remember now. On Netflix streaming service. So that is sure to get a load of new subscribers on board. I would have thought. Just Trekkie fans who simply can't wait to see it will be subscribing in their droves, I believe. I think it's big news, and Amazon got Top Gear, and I think
Netflix have
aced them with the getting Star Trek on board. Yeah, it's definitely big news. No news whether it's 4K Ultra HD rather. I would doubt it, but you never know. It might be. It might.
Isn't it being filmed as CBS as the actual backing network?
Yes, it's definitely CBS.
And then they haven't historically thus far been particularly big on 4K material, from what I understand.
Is that right? I wouldn't actually know CBS's track record. So big news either way. So for Trekkie fans who are existing Netflix subscribers, I would take it this is extremely good news. Personally, I couldn't give a monkeys.
Well, that's your prerogative. I say I've been loving trawling through some of the old episodes on.
Yeah, added to that, well, they've got the entire back catalogue.
Yeah,
of
they do.
Star Trek.
And fabulous it is too. I won't hear a word said against it. So.
And although the third film has literally just opened up at the cinema the day we're recording this podcast, they're already talking about the fourth film. And Ed, I believe you have some information regarding that.
Well, yes. When this broke, we were all a bit puzzled because we were still sort of a bit concerned that this latest film was going to be a bit of a damp squib. But it would appear that a fourth film has been greenlit even before the third one has earned any money at all. And it goes back to a core content item of most Star Trek episodes and films. We've got a spot of time travel, which gives the opportunity to bring back Kirk's dad, which for sort of trivia fans, in the 2009 film was played by a sort of pre-terribly famous Chris Hemsworth. So that could potentially be interesting. I'll be interested to see how they crack on with that. But in many regards, I'm just in many ways just pleased that the franchise does appear to be, still getting some investment and still having some work done with it. I mean, I hesitate to describe myself as a true Trekkie, but I do generally enjoy the stuff, and I've thus far found it, this rebooted stuff to be quite watchable. So I'm glad that it's sort of continuing from there, really.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see where. I mean, as you say, time travel plots have been used quite a few times, both in Star Trek TV series and in various Star Trek movies, including the most recent. The recent franchise was rebooted using time travel as a way of basically keeping the same character but changing the progression of the stories, which actually I thought was quite clever. So I mean, it'd be cool. And obviously, Chris Hemsworth, as you say, was not a big star when he played Kirk's dad. So having him around would be interesting as well.
Although, to be fair, he I have to say, that opening sequence of the original 2009
film. I cried.
Yes, it's
not kidding. I found it really emotional.
A genuinely lovely piece of cinema. Yeah. So, yeah, really if he's able to bring some of that, then I'm all for it. Why not? Bring it on.
You're right. They got more emotion in that opening sequence than they managed to get in Star Trek Into Darkness, where they really wanted a big emotional ending and hadn't earned it. But for somehow that opening 10 minutes, they played it perfectly. And it was actually.
It's a perfect combination of the right people, the right situation, a perfect score. I mean,
the score's
the
fantastic.
score untouchable. So yeah, that's how you do it. That's how you bring the tears. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, it gets all, there are all sorts of fascinating possibilities about continuity and the like from what happens if the two meet and all the rest of it. So yeah, I'm as much as I ever get excited about things that require me to go to the cinema and interact with other people, I'm guardedly excited.
And on that bombshell, incredibly, we've run out of time. So it's the end of another podcast. Although if you want to time travel, you can always go back to the beginning and listen to this podcast again, can't you? And that's it for this week. So my thanks to Mark Hodgkinson.
This is an extremely primitive and paranoid culture.
And Ed Selley.
Everyone remember where we parked.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark avforums.com for the latest reviews, news and videos. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you've enjoyed the show. I'm Steve Withers. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.